I didn't even want to go. I remember sitting on the edge of our bed that afternoon, tying my shoes while Megan stood in front of the mirror curling her hair, talking about who would be there, how good it would be to get out for once. Her tone had that finality to it, the kind that said there wasn't room for debate. But I tried anyway. Do we really have to go? I asked, trying not to sound whiny but probably failing. She didn't look at me. Tyler, we've been cooped up in this house for weeks. That's kind of the point of the holidays, isn't it? Rest, recharge. She finally turned around, curling iron in hand, and raised an eyebrow. Recharge from what? I didn't have an answer for that, just gave a half smile and mumbled something about being tired. She rolled her eyes. Come on, this one night. You know how much they've been wanting us to come. Besides, she added, a little too casually, we haven't seen people in forever. It'll be fun. That was the thing with Megan. She could wrap mandatory fun in the prettiest paper, and it still felt like a chore. The drive to the party was long. I stared out the passenger window most of the way while she hummed along to some playlist she said the hosts had sent out. An hour of curated good vibes. She seemed excited, more than usual. Not giddy like a kid, but like someone headed toward something they had been waiting on. The house was beautiful. Big, modern, cold in that stylish way. All glass and metal edges and furniture you can't sit on without feeling like you're breaking something expensive. It belonged to college friends of Megan's. A couple I barely knew, who were always doing really well for themselves. You know the type. Inside, it was like a holiday movie set. Soft lights, indie covers of Christmas songs, catered hors d'oeuvres, an entire table for just desserts. Everyone was dressed like they were expecting to be photographed. Megan disappeared almost immediately into a group of friends, leaving me to do that slow, lonely walk to the drinks table, pretending I knew more people than I did. I spent most of the night with a bourbon in one hand and my phone in the other, scrolling through football scores and texting my brother to avoid looking like I had no one to talk to. Every once in a while, Megan would float past, introduce me to someone, touch my shoulder, smile and vanish again, like a ghost hostess. Around 11:30, someone handed out party hats and noisemakers. I ended up in the kitchen with a guy named Rick, some finance bro with strong opinions on crypto and an even stronger cologne. I wasn't really listening, to be honest. My eyes kept drifting toward the hallway, where Megan had last been. And that's when I noticed something strange. She wasn't with the people she'd been laughing with earlier. Instead, she was by the staircase, tucked into a quiet corner near the coat closet, talking to a man I didn't recognize. Dark blazer, fitted, sharp haircut, confident posture like he belonged there or didn't care if he didn't. They were standing close, too close for casual. I told myself not to assume, not to jump to conclusions. Maybe he was a friend of someone from her office, or an old college buddy I hadn't met. But the way she leaned in toward him, the way she tilted her head just slightly while speaking, it didn't feel like strangers. It felt practiced. I excused myself from Rick, who didn't notice, and made my way through the crowd. I didn't want to confront her. I didn't want to make a scene. I just wanted to understand what I was seeing. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe I was being paranoid. But then I heard her voice. Low, int asterisk mate. Just above a whisper. He still hasn't figured it out. 7 words. That's all it took. My stomach dropped. My brain started spinning in half a dozen directions at once, trying to plug that sentence into a scenario that wasn't about me. Maybe she was talking about someone else. Maybe she was joking. Maybe I didn't hear it right. But then she turned. Maybe she felt my presence, or maybe she saw the reflection of my face in the glass behind him. Her eyes widened, just for a split second. And in that moment, she looked like a kid who had been caught red-handed. Not surprised, but busted. But then, just like that, she reset. Her expression shifted into something breezy. She threw her head back and laughed. Not a real laugh, I've known her long enough to tell, but a performative one. Then she called out, cheerful as ever. Tyler, there you are. She stepped away from the guy, still too smoothly, and grabbed the arm of a mutual friend who had just walked by. We were just talking about your birthday next month, she said, grinning. Surprise plans. You weren't supposed to hear that. The guy in the blazer said nothing. Just sipped his drink, glanced at me briefly, and turned away. Someone clapped me on the back and handed me a second drink. Megan leaned in and kissed my cheek. I felt like I had been cast in a play I didn't audition for, and everyone else had the script but me. The countdown started soon after. 10, 9, 8. She wrapped her arm around my waist. 7, 6, 5. Her nails dug slightly into my side. For 3, 2. I didn't look at her. I looked at the man in the blazer. He was still watching her. 1. Cheers. Kisses. Confetti. Shouts of Happy New Year. I kissed her because everyone else was kissing. It was automatic. Hollow. She pulled away first. Smiling. Radiant. Like nothing had happened. And me? I smiled too. Because that's what you do when you're not ready to admit your world might be coming apart. You play along. But I heard her. Clear as day. He still hasn't figured it out. The morning after the party, Megan acted like nothing had happened. She made pancakes, put music on in the kitchen, wore one of my hoodies like she always used to in the early days, back when we didn't have to try so hard to feel close. She danced barefoot while waiting for the coffee to brew, humming some indie song I didn't recognize, and I just sat there, pretending the previous night hadn't cracked open something inside me. I watched her like a stranger, not angry, not even suspicious yet, just observing, like I was taking inventory of the person I thought I knew, noticing the details I used to overlook. The weirdest part? She didn't seem nervous. If she knew I'd heard her, and judging by her face, she absolutely knew. She didn't show it. There was no awkward pause, no explanation, no guilt bubbling up behind her eyes. She just acted like the party was a success and we were fine. And for a while, I told myself maybe it was nothing. Maybe I misheard. Maybe she was talking about someone else. Maybe that man in the blazer was part of a surprise birthday plan I hadn't figured out yet. But the more I tried to rationalize it, the more something inside me pushed back. The first thing I noticed was her phone. Used to be, she'd leave it lying around the house. On the kitchen counter. On the couch. Sometimes face up, buzzing with texts from friends or family. Now it was always with her. Always face down. Locked. She started bringing it into the bathroom, even during quick showers. I told myself that was normal. We all keep our phones close these days. But it felt different now. One night, maybe a week after the party, I came home early from work. Her gym bag was by the door, but her car wasn't in the driveway. I figured she went for a run or maybe to the store. When she got back, she was in a dress. Not the yoga pants and tank top she usually wore to the gym, but a dark, form-fitting dress I'd only ever seen her wear to conferences or big meetings. I made a joke. "Did you do deadlifts in that?" She laughed, kissed me on the cheek, and said she had a meeting after. Last-minute thing. Didn't want to change twice. Sounded reasonable, but it didn't sit right. Later that night, I opened her gym bag. It was empty. No water bottle, no towel, no shoes. Not even a deodorant stick. Just the tag from the dry cleaner still stuck to the zipper. The next day, I told myself to drop it. That I was being paranoid. That marriage isn't about interrogating every odd moment. But it kept piling up. The inconsistencies, the half-truths, the way she always seemed a little out of sync with me. Like we were living in the same house on slightly different timelines. Then came the cafe incident. We were driving past the waterfront one afternoon, and I mentioned we should grab a coffee at this place where we'd celebrated our last anniversary. She smiled politely. "Which one?" I glanced over at her. "You know, Oak and Pine. The place with the little garden out back." She shook her head. "I don't think I've been there." For a second, I thought she was joking. "You're kidding, right? We went there in June. We sat outside, you made fun of the guy with the man bun playing guitar?" She blinked at me, confused. "No, I think that was with your sister." It wasn't. I was sure of it. I even had a picture on my phone. Us smiling in front of the ivy wall. I didn't show it to her. I just nodded, said, "Yeah, maybe," and stared out the window for the rest of the ride. Later that night, I pulled up the photo. June 17th. Her in a sundress, laughing at something I'd said. I couldn't stop staring at the expression on her face. That version of her felt real. But the woman beside me lately, she felt like a replica. That's when I started revisiting moments I had brushed off. There was the time she snapped at me for picking her up from work unannounced. Said it stressed her out. That she felt rushed, having to suddenly wrap things up. It was a weird reaction, but I'd let it slide. There were the new clothes, not a lot, just enough to notice. Dresses she never wore at home. Lipstick shades I'd never seen. At first, I thought maybe she was just reinventing herself. People change. Styles shift. But then I found the scarf. It was in the back seat of her car, half crumpled under a box of reusable shopping bags. Not her style, gray wool, masculine cut. Faint cologne on it. Something earthy, musky, expensive. I asked her about it casually over dinner. "Oh," she said, barely looking up from her pasta. "It's Sarah's. She left it in my car after brunch." She didn't ask which scarf. Didn't ask why I was in her car. Just answered like she'd already prepared for the question. Like she'd rehearsed. I didn't press it. But I remembered. And once you start remembering, really remembering, it's hard to stop. You start noticing patterns. Like how she always angled her laptop away from me now, or how she cleared her browser history more often than she used to. Like how she used to tell me stories about her coworkers. But lately, I couldn't even tell you who she was working with. Names changed. Timelines blurred. I even asked once. About a guy she used to mention all the time, Adam or Alex, something with an A. "Haven't heard you talk about him lately." She blinked like she didn't know who I meant. "Oh, him," she said. "He got transferred. Months ago." But something about the way she said it made me wonder if he'd ever existed in the first place. I started checking timestamps, watching how long it took her to respond to texts, listening to her voice when she answered calls in another room. Every beep from her phone made my chest tighten. Every excuse made my stomach twist. And the worst part? I hated who I was becoming. I hated snooping. I hated doubting her. I hated that I didn't trust my own wife, the person I'd once believed in more than anyone. But what I hated more was the silence between us. It wasn't just in the words we weren't saying. It was in the way she pulled away when I put my arm around her on the couch. The way she avoided eye contact when we kissed goodnight. The way she started changing clothes behind closed doors, quietly, efficiently, like her body was suddenly off limits. At night, I'd lie awake next to her, watching the soft glow of her screen light up her face as she typed something I wasn't supposed to see. I never asked, never confronted, because part of me still hoped I was wrong, that all of this was just stress, that maybe I was the one who had changed, who had pulled away without realizing. But deep down, I knew better. You don't forget your anniversary cafe. You don't wear a business dress to a gym. You don't whisper to a stranger, "He still hasn't figured it out." Unless there's something to figure out. So I stopped trying to convince myself it was all in my head. And I started watching. Closely. Not like a jealous husband. Like a man trying to understand if the life he built was already gone. And he was the last one to notice. I didn't confront her. That's the part people always question later. They ask why I didn't just ask, why I didn't demand the truth, why I chose silence over a fight. The answer is simple, even if it doesn't sound noble. I didn't trust her words anymore. Not enough to gamble my sanity on them. If I was going to know, I needed to know without interpretation. Without excuses. Without tears or revised timelines. So I lied. I told Megan I had to leave town for a few days. A last-minute strategy session with a client, mandatory attendance, no flexibility. She barely reacted. Just nodded, asked which days, and reminded me to take my laptop charger. No disappointment. No, "I'll miss you." Just logistics. That should have hurt more than it did. The morning I left, she kissed me at the door, light and quick, like you kiss a relative. I loaded my suitcase into the trunk, waved, and drove off. I didn't head to the airport. I didn't even leave the city. I rented a small, forgettable apartment in a neighboring district, the kind with thin walls and no personality. Somewhere I wouldn't exist. That afternoon, I installed a small camera across the street from our house. Nothing dramatic. Just a clear view of the front door and driveway. I told myself I was being methodical, not paranoid. Careful, not cruel. The first night, nothing happened. She came home around 7. Lights on by 8. Curtains drawn. Normal routine. I almost laughed at myself. Almost packed everything up and went home, embarrassed by the spiral I'd allowed myself to fall into. The second night was different. Around 10:30 p.m. The streetlight flickered on, casting that dull orange glow across the pavement. I was sitting in my car a few houses down, engine off, watching the live feed on my phone more than the house itself. My stomach was tight, but quiet, like something waiting. Then a silver car pulled up. Not hers. It parked in front of our driveway with the kind of confidence that comes from familiarity. The driver didn't hesitate, didn't circle the block, didn't check directions. He just stopped, stepped out, and adjusted his jacket. I recognized him immediately. The man from the party. Dark blazer. Same posture. Same ease. He walked up to the front door and unlocked it. With a key. That was the moment my chest went hollow. Not tight. Not burning. Just empty. Like something essential had been removed without warning. I watched him enter my house. Our house, and close the door behind him. I waited. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. At that point, I stopped watching the screen and drove back. Slowly. Like I was heading toward a place that no longer belonged to me. When I arrived, the front door was slightly open. A warm strip of light spilled onto the porch. Inside, the house smelled like food. Familiar but wrong. Like a set dress to look like home. I stepped inside quietly. From the kitchen, I heard her voice. Relaxed. Soft. Unguarded. I paused in the hallway. Megan stood at the stove, stirring something in a pan. She wore pajamas I had never seen before. Not the old ones with the frayed hem. Not the ones she borrowed from me. These were new. Intentional. At the table sat the man. In my t-shirt. Not a random shirt of mine. My favorite one. The faded gray one I'd owned longer than our marriage. He was barefoot, legs stretched out, completely at ease. Like he'd been there 100 times. She set a plate in front of him and sat down beside him. Her hand rested on his shoulder. Not hesitantly. Not guiltily. Comfortably. No one screamed. No one froze. No one scrambled for explanations. Because there was nothing to explain. They were just living. I don't know how long I stood there watching. Seconds. Minutes. Time felt optional in that moment. Eventually, I turned and went back to the car. I didn't slam doors. Didn't confront them. Didn't even cry. I drove back to the apartment and sat in silence until the sky began to lighten. The next morning, I returned home. His car was gone. Megan sat at the kitchen table with my mug, the chipped one she never liked, staring out the window. She didn't look surprised to see me, just nodded, like my presence was expected. Morning, she said. I nodded back. We didn't talk about what I'd seen. Not then. Not later. Not ever. And somehow, that silence said everything words couldn't. He was gone when I got back. Not just out for coffee or waiting in a car down the block. He was gone in that final way, like someone who knew his part in the story had ended. No trace. Not even a forgotten jacket or glass on the counter. Just her. Megan was sitting in the kitchen, still in those unfamiliar pajamas, barefoot, legs tucked up on the chair like a kid who hadn't cleaned up her mess yet. She was drinking from my mug, the one with the crack near the handle that she always said I should toss. She didn't look up when I walked in, just kept staring out the window, into the backyard where the last of the winter frost clung to the fence like it didn't know where else to go. Her hair was tied up messily, but not in that carefree way that used to make me smile. More like she didn't care how she looked anymore or didn't need to. Hey, she said finally. That was it. Not, I'm sorry. Not, let me explain. Not, I didn't mean for you to see that. Just hey. Like I'd come back from the grocery store instead of from the edge of walking away for good. I didn't answer. I walked past her, down the hall and into our bedroom. Sat on the edge of the bed. Stared at the floor. This was how it started, the Cold War version of marriage. The version where everything's technically intact, but none of it means anything anymore. We still lived in the same house, ate at the same table, slept or didn't sleep in the same bed, but the temperature had dropped to a level you couldn't measure with a thermostat. It was like the walls absorbed everything we weren't saying. She never brought up the night I came back. Never asked where I'd gone, what I saw, what I thought. She didn't confess, didn't lie, didn't pretend. Just acted like something heavy had shifted, and now we were quietly walking around it. Breakfast became the first ritual to fall apart. She used to scribble notes on napkins, little things like, "Good luck today," or inside jokes I'd forgotten the origin of. Now breakfast appeared on the counter without a word. 2 plates, silent offerings. She still cooked for both of us, but with the efficiency of someone working a shift at a hotel. No joy, no warmth, just task completion. Sometimes I wouldn't even eat it, just left it there, untouched. By evening it would be gone, cleaned up without comment. We stopped watching shows together. No more shared laughter over dumb sitcoms, no late-night documentaries. I'd walk into the living room, and if she was there, she'd stand up and stretch like she'd just finished what she was doing, even if the remote was still warm in her hand. "Oh, I was just heading to bed," she'd say, even if it was 8 p.m. Or, "I've got some reading to catch up on." When there were no books on the nightstand, we were like magnets flipped the wrong way, always moving just enough to avoid touching. I started staying out later. Not for work, not for friends, just for space. I'd sit in my car outside the grocery store, pretending to scroll through emails, not ready to go home. Some nights, I parked at the overlook just north of town, where you could see the lights stretching out into the valley. I'd sit there with the radio low and wonder how a house could be so full and still feel like a vacuum. When I did come home, it was like walking into a stage set, everything in its place. The lights dimmed to the right level. The smell of clean laundry, a candle flickering on the mantel. But none of it was real. Even her clothes changed. Gone were the dresses I used to call trouble, the deep cuts, the high heels, the perfumes that lingered on her scarf long after she left the room. She started dressing like the old version of herself. Long sleeves, muted colors, ponytails, like she was trying to rewind the clock. She stopped wearing makeup at home, started wearing my t-shirts, my sweatshirts, left her hairbrush on my side of the sink like it used to be. All the artifacts of a shared life placed back in their original positions, like that would bring us back to where we started. But it wasn't a return to innocence. It was a costume change. She was curating nostalgia, rebuilding a version of the marriage where none of this had happened. She didn't want to be honest. She wanted plausible deniability, the kind that could be dressed up in gestures. One day, I opened the fridge and saw she'd stocked it with all the stuff I used to love. Things I hadn't bought in years, the yogurt brand I always got in college, the mustard only one store in town carries, the almond milk I stopped drinking after I turned 30. None of it was stuff she ever touched. It was all for me, a spread of strategic memory triggers. Later that week, I came home to see she'd replanted the flower bed in the backyard, the one she used to mock me for even having. "We're not 50-year-olds with matching gloves," she'd once joked when I suggested doing some gardening together. But there it was, fresh mulch, new bulbs, gardening gloves on the steps, dirt under her nails. I stood at the kitchen window, watching her trim the edges with the same care she used to give to decorating birthday cakes. "Thought it could use some life again," she said casually when she came in, shaking dirt from her hands. I nodded. We didn't talk about the life she had already brought in. The only real conversation we had was 2 weeks later, in the hallway, both of us reaching for the same laundry basket. "You can take it," I said, stepping back. She paused. "We can share it." I looked at her. Her face was neutral, too neutral, like she was trying to land somewhere between guilt and grace. She didn't look angry or sad, just tired. So was I. It was in that moment I realized this wasn't a healing process. There was no healing. There hadn't even been a wound acknowledged. Just this dull ache of pretending it never happened. I wasn't living with someone who wanted forgiveness. I was living with someone who wanted reset. Megan didn't want to talk, didn't want to open the door to whatever came after truth. She didn't want to sit on the couch and cry and ask for another chance. She wanted me to act like it had all been a misunderstanding. A glitch. A blip we could gloss over with enough shared dinners and trips to HomeGoods. She wasn't trying to rebuild trust. She was trying to overwrite the file. And the more I noticed, the clearer it became. None of this was about me. It was about her story. The image of the marriage she still wanted to present. To friends, to family, maybe even to herself. One where the husband understood. Where the mess was temporary. Where no one had to admit the foundation had cracked. So long as the walls looked clean. She still wore her ring. Not once did she take it off. Even when she did the dishes or painted her nails. I think she wanted me to see it. To believe that meant something. But rings don't prove love. Silence doesn't erase betrayal. And routine doesn't equal redemption. So we lived in it. This house filled with unspoken words and perfect illusions. We weren't fighting. We weren't making up. We were surviving. And sometimes survival is the slowest way to break. I don't know when she decided we were healing. There was no conversation. No apology. No moment where she sat me down and said, "Here's the truth. Here's what I did. And here's why I'm still here." No, she just started doing things. Little things at first. A clean drawer. A reorganized bookshelf. Fresh sheets on the bed. Not the cheap ones we usually used, high thread count, something expensive. I noticed the tag when I pulled them up one night. Egyptian cotton. She hated Egyptian cotton. Said it got too hot. She didn't ask if I wanted to work on us. She just began acting like we already were. I'd come home to music playing softly from the kitchen speaker. Jazz, mostly, the safe kind, the kind that didn't offend or stir too much emotion. She'd be chopping vegetables, sometimes singing along under her breath. A candle burning. A new recipe. A smile. "You're home early," she'd say. I never asked if she meant it. If she hoped I wasn't. If she watched the clock the way I did. Counting the seconds until I walked through the door so she could resume the performance. Because that's what it was now. A show. Set design. Lighting. Lines memorized. She started making my favorite meals again. Mushroom risotto. Baked salmon. That butternut squash soup I once joked was the only thing that ever made me forget how bad winter felt. And I'll admit, she got it right. The taste. The timing. The texture. Perfect. But the warmth was gone. I'd sit across from her and feel like I was watching someone cosplaying a wife. Sometimes she'd smile like she was proud of herself. Other times, she'd just watch me eat, silent, as if waiting for a verdict. Like I was a judge in a competition she never agreed to enter but now had to win anyway. One night she put on a playlist from our honeymoon. Bon Iver, The National, that obscure Icelandic band we'd stumbled on at a bar in Reykjavik. She played it during dinner casually. Never mentioned it. Just watched me out of the corner of her eye as the songs floated through the room. I didn't say a word. I just finished my soup and rinsed the bowl. The weirdest part? She never touched me. No reaching for my hand. No lingering goodnights. No soft grazing of shoulders in the hallway. And yet, somehow the distance felt like it was closing. Or maybe she just wanted it to seem that way. Like if we got close enough to the image of marriage, we wouldn't notice the marriage itself was gone. One morning, I found her in the backyard, kneeling in front of the flower bed she'd replanted. She was muttering something under her breath. Counting? Praying? Repeating a list? I didn't ask. She looked up at me, squinting in the sun. "These need pruning already," she said. "Everything grows so fast when you don't watch it." I nodded. She stood, wiped her hands on her jeans, and walked past me. No kiss, no smile, just the scent of the old shampoo she hadn't used in years, wafting behind her like she was trying to resurrect a version of herself I might still love. The next weekend, she suggested we take a trip. Just us. To the coast. Clear our heads. I looked at her for a long time. "The ocean doesn't erase memory," I said. She blinked. "What?" I shook my head. "Nothing." She didn't bring it up again. Instead, she pivoted. Moved on to house projects. She painted the guest room. Bought new curtains. Replaced the mirror in the hallway. The one that had a tiny crack in the corner we always joked gave it character. When I asked what happened to the old one, she said, "It didn't reflect the space anymore." I almost laughed. Almost. She tried to cook breakfast on Sunday mornings like we used to. The full spread, pancakes, eggs, the bacon I gave up a year ago. She never asked if I wanted it again. Just made it. Sometimes I ate it. Other times, I left it on the plate and went for a run. When she offered to come with me one morning, I told her no. "I need to be alone with my thoughts," I said. She smiled like she understood. Of course. But her eyes said otherwise. It wasn't love in them. It was fear. Not fear of losing me. Fear of losing control. Because that's what this all was now. Control management. She didn't want to be forgiven. She wanted to rewrite the narrative. She wanted the next chapter to begin so badly. She skipped the part where the damage was acknowledged. Where we actually stood in the ashes together and said, "This burned." Instead, she swept, dusted, lit candles, set the stage, and handed me a script with no dialogue. I wasn't a partner anymore. I was a prop, a piece of the set design meant to suggest stability, healing, growth. I wasn't allowed to be angry, wasn't allowed to mention what happened, because that would ruin the scene. Every time she did something kind, made dinner, folded my laundry, left a fresh towel by the shower, I felt more suffocated, because none of it came with acknowledgement. "No, I know I hurt you. No, what do you need from me?" Just this constant push to move on, unspoken, but relentless. And it was working. On the surface, friends started reaching out again. Couples we hadn't seen since the holidays invited us to dinner. She accepted on our behalf. "We could use the distraction," she said. I nodded. At dinner, she laughed at the right times, brushed my arm gently, told stories that made it sound like we were doing great. People believed her. Why wouldn't they? She looked the part, spoke the part. Even I found myself nodding along, smiling politely. And maybe that's when I realized she hadn't just betrayed me before. She was still doing it. In plain sight, not with another man, not with lies or passwords or secret meetings, but with this performance, this charade of healing that erased the cost. She didn't want to fix the marriage. She wanted to reset the clock. But I remembered. I remembered the scarf in her car, the cologne, the man in my t-shirt, the voice, hers, whispering, "He still hasn't figured it out." And now that I had, she wanted me to forget, to eat the soup, to kiss her on cue, to be the husband who forgave silently. But I couldn't, because forgiveness without truth isn't healing. It's surrender. And I wasn't ready to surrender. Not yet. One afternoon, I found our wedding album tucked behind a stack of old paperwork. I hadn't seen it in years. I flipped through the pages slowly. Her smile beamed in every *T. Dazzling, sure of herself. Mine looked softer, full of love, blind love. I didn't feel anger, just fatigue. Not toward her, toward the role I'd been assigned without my consent. The husband who endures, who understands, who stays. She never said sorry, never called it cheating, just filled the silence with actions. My favorite soup, folded shirts, new slippers by the door. I realized then, she didn't see me as a person anymore. I was a symbol, a background character in the version of the story she wanted to keep telling. One where she never had to admit what she did. At dinner with friends, someone made a joke, and Megan chimed in, smiling. "Tyler's so calm. Sometimes I forget he's even here." Everyone laughed. I didn't. I stood up, thanked them politely, and left. No scene. No words. Just the quiet refusal to keep pretending. That night, someone texted to ask what happened. Later, I heard Megan told them, "He left a long time ago. I just noticed now." And maybe she was right. The version of me who trusted her, who believed in us. He'd been gone since the moment I heard her whisper. The night at the party. The man in the t-shirt. It didn't end with a fight. It ended with a decision. I wasn't going to explain myself. I wasn't going to scream. I was just done being in a story where the truth no longer mattered.